growth forecasts ninyo, I was looking at the assumptions, tila wala pong assumption pagdating po sa COVID. So I would like to know, nung sinabi niyo po na magko-contract ang ekonomiya natin ng at most 6.6%, ano po ang naiisip ninyong COVID situation?
Mr. Chair, Madam.
Secretary Chua.
Yeah, that's a very good question. In fact, we made two major assumptions. And by making them, we are doing this in a environment of uncertainty. So as we get more data, we are going to refine them. The first assumption is we do not have a U-turn on the quarantine status. Otherwise, that would worsen the GDP. So dapat GCQ or better. The second assumption is that a vaccine will be available mid next year. That supports our recovery and normalization. Now, we are monitoring every month the various indicators. And so far naman, we have seen the exports, imports, production, and labor force make a U-turn significantly. So with that, we think it would be gradually going to be better. Thank you.
Right.
Your final question, Congresswoman Kimbo.
Yes, I noticed, Secretary Carl, that in your list of economic priority bills, so you listed Create, Fist, and Guide. Well, offhand, it would seem that these bills are going to benefit large firms more than small ones, because Create would be a reduction in the corporate income tax. Guide creates a special purpose vehicle for distressed companies, which also tend to be big. And FIST is really your SPV that would encourage banks to give out loans. The problem here is that 77% of our population tends to be unbanked. So again, it would seem to me that this would benefit the larger ones rather than the small ones. So my question is there anything in your list? Maybe it's not in your slide, but there's some list somewhere. Anong binabalak po natin para tulungan ang mga MSMEs? Baka naman pwede po namin kayo tulungan sa bill na yan.
Mr. Chairman,
Representative Secretary Dominguez.
first of all, Create is going to lower the tax rate for everyone. As you know, the small and medium enterprises in this country have never had a tax break. It's the big ones that go and register with PESAs and all the other incentives. We are the only government who is actually going to have a tax incentive for the small and medium enterprises. Now, the rate we are bringing it down is also to bring the rate to the same level as the rates in ASEAN. Number two, the idea of having the idea of having a FIST bill is to be able to allow the banks to clear their books quickly so that they can lend money not only to the big ones but also to the small and medium enterprises. Can you imagine what would happen if the banks are not able to clear their books? They will obviously have less money to lend. The estimates of the BAP on the effects of the FIST bill is to be able to allow the banks to clear roughly a trillion, the estimated bad debt of about $1 trillion pesos, which will in turn allow them to lend another 3.5 trillion pesos. So without the FIST bill, the economy is going to be worse off, and the worst hit is going to be the small and medium enterprises. So by allowing them to clear their books, allows them actually to have more money for the small and medium enterprises. I also want to point out that the Monetary Board this is the first time the Monetary Board has actually allowed loans to small and medium enterprises to be used as part of their reserve requirement. And nobody has ever done that in the past. And I resent this accusation that all these bills are only for the large corporations. So I hope this clarifies this misconception that the good Congresswoman is trying to promote in this country. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, si Mr. Secretary mismo nagsabi po kanina na 67% of all taxes are collected from large corporations. I'm just saying that. Secretary Carl, hindi yata nasagot. Ano po yung...
It's precisely because they are large corporations that the taxes are collected from them.
Secretary, since you're there...
No government has ever reduced the tax rate, including the government that was headed up by the party of the congressman in the last administration.
Mr. Chair, may...
Yes, Congresswoman Kimbo, tapos na po ang iyong oras.
Sandali lang po, nakisuyo po si Congressman Haresco po sa akin.
Sige po.
Kung pwede lang itanong ko daw ito kay
Sige po,
Secretary
pakibasa
Dominguez
po.
kasi nandiyan naman po
Pakibasa
si...
po.
Ang tanong po, Secretary Dominguez ni Congressman Haresco is why can't we take out more loans from the BSP considering that we've taken out a 300 billion loan from BSP and it's going to be paid off by the end of the month, which means we would have a fresh credit line, and with Bayanihan 2, that credit line increases by another 10%. So ang tanong po niya is why can't we take advantage of that and take out more loans from the BSP rather than from abroad or from other domestic sources, which I think is also good kasi kung inutang natin from the BSP, ang effect po sa market rates ay hindi ganun kalaki, in which case we're able to avoid the crowding out of private investments, sir.
Secretary Dominguez.
Coming out at this point in time, Congressman Haresco. In fact, the actions of the Monetary Board have increased the liquidity in the system, and there is absolutely no crowding out at the moment. Number one. Number two, the BSP has already supported us over and above has supported us to the extent of around 750 or 800 billion pesos, both through direct loans as well as their support to the bonds to the secondary market. We believe is the right amount at this time, and if necessary, we will negotiate for additional funding from the central bank, but at this point, we don't see the necessity for doing it. Thank you.
Maraming salamat, Representative
Isa pa
Kimbo.
pong tanong si Congressman Ted. Basahin ko na lang po verbatim.
Ilan tanong po ba yan, Congresswoman?
Isa pa po.
Sige po.
This is for, I suppose, Secretary Abisado. Ang sabi po niya, rural infrastructure has a higher multiplier effect than PPP. So why is PPP much more than countryside infra? Yun po yung kanyang
Secretary Abisado.
That's rural infrastructure versus build.
PPP
po.
Public
PPP.
Private
Opo.
Partnership. So siguro, mga build projects through PPP. Oh.
I think NEDA will have...
Sige po,
more-
Secretary Chua.
Mr. Chair, yung budget po natin ng infrastructure sa budget, aabot na po yan ng more than 1 trillion next year, in just 1 year. The amounts that I saw in the PPPs are not only for 1 year, it's spread over several years. Kasi ang construction is over many years. So I think the comparison is not that accurate. We have to compare apples to apples. Thank you. If we want to compare the total cost of PPP, then we have to compare the total cost of the infra in the budget, especially the small ones, over the same many years. Thank you.
Ang susunod po na magtatanong ay si Representative Edsel Lagman. Congressman Lagman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me continue my interaction with Secretary Dominguez. Secretary Dominguez, you candidly admitted that the proceeds of the 8.83 billion US dollars in foreign borrowings have been released and received by the Philippines, and 6.86 billion of which has been disbursed. May we know when the loan proceeds were received and where the disbursement for COVID response?
Secretary Dominguez.
Yes, I don't have, okay, I'll check first if we have the data of when these loans were received. They did not come in one lump sum, sir. So the releases were as follows, okay? World Bank, we signed the loan in April 10. Oh, no, sorry. Let me start again. World Bank loan was effective 27 April. The amount is $500 million and disbursed $500 million. ADB, another loan effective April 27, 2020, amount received $1.5 billion US dollars, disbursed $1.5 billion US dollars. ADB, again, May 5, $200 million, disbursed $200 million. ROP bonds, due in 2045, received May 5, 2020. The amount is 1.35 billion US dollars, disbursed 1.35 billion US dollars. RP bonds due 2030, May 5, 2020, $1 billion dollars, released $1 billion dollars. World Bank loan effective June 19 in the amount of $500 million, released $500 million. ADB loan effective June 30, $400 million, released $400 million. AIIB loan effective June 30, received $750 million, released $750 million. AFD, which is the aid agency of France, loan is effective August 7, 2020, of $165 million, not yet disbursed. Another loan from AFD from France, effective the 7th of August, $110 million, not yet disbursed. World Bank loan for effective May 6, 2020, in the amount of $100 million, that's been already disbursed. So these are the numbers we have here, and we can provide them in writing, Mr. Congressman.
We will appreciate that submission in writing. But my other question was, where the disbursement for COVID response?
I beg your pardon?
Were the disbursements from these foreign borrowings for COVID response?
Yes, they were, because they are all budget support.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Secretary, DBM Secretary Abisado said that the DBM had released as of August 376.6 billion for COVID response releases. And according to him, these expenditures were not sourced from foreign borrowings. If this is so, then for what expenses were the 6.86 billion disbursed?
I don't, sorry, I don't know exactly what Secretary Abisado said. I can, I have to ask him exactly what he said so that we can reconcile our numbers.
Mr. Chairman, if this will not be deducted from my time, I would like to quote the statement of Secretary Abisado with respect to the expenditure sources of the 376.6 billion. Can I do that, Mr. Chairman, without being deducted from my time?
Yes, Congressman Lagman.
Thank you. According to Secretary Abisado, 666.5 billion from discontinued programs, activities, and projects in the 2018 and 2019 GAAs. 9.8 billion from regular agency projects, and 100.2 billion from special purpose funds. The total of this is exactly 376.6 billion for COVID response releases. Mr. Secretary.
Okay, yes,
Secretary.
I hear you. However, Mr. Congressman, Your Honor, let's say, I'll give you an example. The RP bonds that we secured and released of 2.35 billion US dollars was released by the Treasury to the budget. Now, how the budget allocated those, I don't know, okay? And we don't allocate by source of funds. All the funds come into one account, and they are pooled, and they are released by the budget according to budget item. So we do not borrow and say, okay, this is for this. But I will tell you, all of this money that we borrowed were for COVID response. Now, where one item went exactly, I don't know that. Okay? Because that's not the way we account. That is the way the budget department accounts.
Well, but the fact is, according to Secretary Abisado, all of the 376.6 billion for COVID response the source did not include foreign borrowings. Now let me go to another.
I beg your pardon?
The expenditures for this 376.6 billion for COVID response released by DBM as of August 2020 did not include as a source foreign borrowings. The DBM should know what it is releasing and from what sources it has released the funds.
There is a difference between cash and budget, okay? All the cash funds come from several sources, okay? Part of it is foreign borrowings, part of it is domestic borrowings. And these are all in one account, okay? Now, we know who we owe. However, in our department, we do not know exactly where this peso went to that account. And I don't think the DPM can say which peso came from where. So I hope you understand that we don't account okay, we borrowed this money on the RP bonds, and let's say we borrowed $1 billion, and this will go exactly to this purpose. We don't account it that way. It comes into a pool, and from that pool, you draw different funds for different budgeted purposes.
I hope, Mr. Secretary,
Congressman Lagman,
Mr.
paalala lang po
Chairman,
na kayo po ay nakakonsumo na ng 4 minutes minus yung 30 seconds po na pinededuct natin kanina. Pero maaari nyo pa pong ipagpapayagang po kitang tapusin ng iyong katanungan, Congressman Lagman.
maraming salamat, Mr. Chairman. I was saying that it should be between Secretary Dominguez and Secretary Abisado to check the differences in their perspective with respect to the disbursement of funds. Now, let me go to another point, Mr. Chairman. Under the report of Mr. Secretary Dominguez, what was reported was foreign borrowings. May we know how much had been generated by the Bureau of the Treasury in domestic debts or borrowings
From what date to what date?
since the
What
start
date to what date,
pandemic?
sir?
Beg your pardon?
As of what date?
Well, I am informed that as of June 2020, the amount of 1.2 trillion has been generated by the Bureau of the Treasury, and then also another 516 billion has been sourced from the auction of premium bonds, or more particularly the retail treasury bonds as of August 2020.
Well, let me say that in terms of domestic sources, we have raised 1.376 trillion pesos in gross domestic borrowings as of July 31 to cover our budget deficit and other funding requirements. This includes 300 billion repurchase agreement between the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas and the national government. Moreover, we have received a total of 151.9 billion US dollars, pesos, as of August 31 in remittances from government-owned and controlled corporations since the start of this year. Those are the domestic sources.
And what is the balance, if any, from the domestic borrowings after this supposed disbursement is effective?
Mr. Congressman, as I mentioned to the lady congressman, we do not disclose balances of our holdings because, as I said, we are in the debt market. And once the public knows how much balances we have, they could use that against us when we go and borrow. So I cannot disclose at this time or at any time the balances in our treasury.
Well, I understand that position, but as a member of the House, we would like to know what funds are available to support the budget, more particularly with respect to COVID response and other expenditures under the proposed General Appropriations Bill.
The budget presentation earlier shows the sources of funds, how much we expect to collect in taxes, and how much we expect to borrow, and how much we expect to receive in dividends from our different corporations. So it's there. I don't have it in front of me right now, but it is disclosed there. However, specific balances at any specific time, we do not disclose.
Well, is the government going to secure more foreign borrowings and domestic debts up to the end of the year, in addition to what we have already received or generated?
That is possible.
If it is possible, how much?
I will not disclose that at this time again, because that will put our negotiating position in a bad light. And I'm sure you don't want to contribute to that.
Well, you have disclosed, Mr. Secretary, some time ago that we're expecting another 1 point something billion for COVID-related response from the World Bank. Why did you make that disclosure and you are not
Yes,
going to
yes,
disclose now?
Yes, I have disclosed certain borrowings that we have, but we do not disclose what our future plans and the amounts we are going to borrow as a whole.
Well, there are also disclosures from the Bureau of Treasury that they expect to generate more domestic debts from the continued auction of premium bonds. But whatever it is, I have no.
What we do not disclose is exactly how much.
Well, the amount.
We will borrow more, yes, that is true.
The,
But we do not tell you we will borrow more, how much.
the figure has been disclosed, but I will have to go over my papers to look at the figures, but I can inform you in writing how much had been disclosed.
But we disclose it, but we do not disclose in particular at any particular time what we are going to do, because as I said, that will weaken our negotiating position and will weaken the ability of the Philippine nation to get a better deal. And I am sure, Mr. Congressman, you do not want to weaken our position.
Of course, I do not want to weaken your position, but as a member of the House, I would like to see how much is the balances for which we can source as budgetary support. Now, Mr. Chairman, if I can just ask one question to Secretary Jokno, which would help us.
Congressman Lagman, ikaw po ay nakakonsumo na ng 7 minuto, Congressman Lagman. At puwera po kay Congresswoman Colyamat na pinayagan kong kumonsumo ng 2 magkasunod na 3 minuto ay malaki na po yung binigay ng komiting ito na palugid sa iyong pagtatanong. At kung maaari po, isang huling maikling katanungan na lamang po, Congressman Lagman.
Kay Secretary Jokno. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can I
Pakituloy
proceed?
po ang iyong pagtatanong, Congressman Lagman.
Central Bangko Sentral of the Philippines Governor Jokno. How much more loans for budgetary support or additional provisional advances to finance expenditures authorized by law is the BSP prepared to lend to the national government pursuant to the Bayanihan Coup under Section 4 BBB?
Well, the Bayanihan, under the current law, central bank law, we can give as much as 20% of the average revenue for the last 3 years. And that's approximately 540 billion pesos, Your Honor.
Well, so we would expect that
Billion pesos.
we would expect that additional amount from the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas as an amendment to Section 89 of Republic Act Number 7653 or the new Central Bank Act as amended pursuant to what has been authorized under Bayanihan 2?
Under the Bayanihan 2, I think you have authorized the BSP to lend additional 10%, and we will comply if there is a need on the part of the Department of Finance.
That's 10% of the average income of the national government for fiscal years 2017 to 2019. Is that correct?
That's for the last 3 years, yes, Your Honor.
And so, how much would this amount be? You don't have to answer that, Governor Diokno, now, but most probably you could reply in writing with respect to the amount.
I'll give you the details, Your Honor, but it's approximately around 200 billion pesos.
That is less than the initial 300 billion, which
No, but that's in addition to whatever is authorized under the Central Bank Act, Your Honor.
Anyway, could you kindly reconcile the Central Bank Act and Section 4BBB of the Bayanihan 2 so that we could get a more or less accurate figure of how much does the government expect as additional monetary support from the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas.
I will do that, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Congressman Edsel Lagman, tapos na po ba ang iyong linyada ng pagtatanong?
Hindi pa po tapos pero palagay ko hindi mo ako magbibigyan, Mr. Chairman.
4 na beses na po kita pinagbigyan na Congressman Edsel, at kung po iyong bibilangin, yung isang huling katanungan parating nagiging 3 o 4. Pero sana po ay mag-umpisa kung ikaw po ay may closing statement ay mailathala mo na po sa aming lahat, Congressman Lagman.
Wala po akong closing statement, wala nga akong opening statement, Mr. Chairman. Tatapusin ko na po ito. Maraming salamat na pagbigyan mo ako ng panahon na magtanong.
Maraming salamat, ginagalang Edsel Lagman. Yes, Congressman Sarate.
Mr. Chair, dahil malalim na rin ang gabi, may I just inquire, Mr. Chair, if we can continue this budget presentation? We can suspend na or...
Sa plenary debates na po ang susunod nito, Congressman Sarate.
So, tatapusin na po ito ngayong gabi, yung presentation ng DBCC.
Opo, puwera lang po kung ayaw pa pong umuwi. Kailang panahon po ng COVID ngayon, Congressman Sarate, at kawawa naman po yung ating mga empleyado dito sa Congress kasi tayo pong mga kinatawan ay exempted. Pati po yung mga members ng IATF ay may exemption, pero yung mga kawani po natin, ilan po dito ay wala.
Yes, I understand, Mr. Chair. That's why I was inquiring if we, the possibility of suspending and continuing this in some other.
Maraming salamat po at mukhang may motion si Congressman Dalipe.
Mr. Chairman, considering that we have already exhausted and that was the last for the second round, I move to adjourn, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
There's a pending motion on the floor, duly seconded. Hearing no objections, the hearing or the briefing is adjourned.
And there